I heard a quote once, if you're not scared, you're not learning. That feels like my entire career. I told them what to do. I didn't teach them how to do it.
Because it is possible just to steamroll people and get a result.
I could do it. It's not good. Sometimes, you come into an organization and with a fresh set of eyes, you see immediately what needs to happen. And everybody might agree with you, but change is hard. Changing the mindset from doing transactions to driving insights and recommendations across the business. Sounds small, but you throw a stone into the pond and you get the ripple effect. PE, you're operating more within a box. Now tell me what you can do within that box.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Welcome back to Run the Numbers. Today I'm joined by Maria Izurieta, CFO of Huntress, and someone who's built a career helping companies scale by getting people, processes, and systems aligned in ways that drive real, durable results. Maria's worked across VC, PE, and public companies, and what stands out is her ability to lead finance as a connector across the org. She builds trust fast, simplifies what others overcomplicate, and brings a people-first lens to change management, whether she's introducing a new system or rethinking how finance supports the go-to-market teams. In this episode, we get into her approach to diagnosing problems, whether she starts with data, people, or instinct, and how she balances precision with momentum. We talk about her philosophy of chasing impact over perfection, how to prioritize big wins versus small, compounding ones, and what finance teams can do to show their value beyond just being the no department. Maria also shares how she's built credibility with sales and marketing, how she thinks about the CFO's role in revenue, and why she believes the next gen of CFOs will be defined not only by technical execution, but also by how they listen to the org's needs and their ability to consistently unblock points of friction. Maria, thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thanks. I've been so excited. We started talking about this, back in the spring when we met up at the CFO conference, and I've been excited to do it since.
Yeah, the fine folks at JMI were nice enough to sit me next to you at dinner. Hopefully I didn't bore you with all my metrics questions.
I was reading your blog so often and then get to meet you. It was fun. And you share a last name with the rest of my family.
Yeah, I remember that came up. Funny enough. Well, we'll have to send this recording to them afterwards.
Yeah, that's right.
To kick off the combo, in all the roles that you've been in, you're a serial CFO. A common theme seems to be, Maria, how you've unlocked business results by being effectively the connective tissue across the org. And so if we frame the combo in that light, if it's okay with you, I want to start by going through some of the people, process, and system questions I have for you.
Okay, let's do it.
One of the things that struck me in doing my research on you is that you had this quote that everyone wants an outcome, not just for the business, but for themselves. There's a golden nugget in there. How does that philosophy and focus on the person shape how you go and build your finance teams?
My background has been in high growth tech companies pretty much my entire career. And when you're in environments where you're always trying to do something different, you're always iterating, you're always learning, you're always growing as a business. Because, what got you to 20 million is what's going to get you to 50, isn't what's going to get you to 100 and so on. Having team members that also have that same mentality about themselves really helps grow the business as a whole because they're very comfortable trying something different. I heard a quote once, if you're not scared, you're not learning. And I'm like, that feels like my entire career. I'm always feeling like I'm going out on a limb because I'm trying to do something different to grow the business. I think the whole team has to be comfortable with that level of uncertainty. There's some parts that we bring to the table that we've done before, and we're using our past experiences to inform. And then there's other places where we need to go out and try something different. Having the mindset of being comfortable doing that, it's really important. But also, for me as a leader, is making sure that they have the safe space to try and do things differently. And that if they make a mistake or quite frankly just fail, it's okay because there's some learning that happened in that. That's, to me, is super important.
I know that you're big on having processes in place. Before we hit record on this, we were just reflecting on how fast your company is growing and how you're trying to put the right people in the right spot on the court to get their shot off. If you think about people, process, and systems, I mean, people throw around that trio all the time. What does it mean to you in a scaling org?
The faster that you can get the information to the business, the faster that you're able to remove friction points so that others can be able to focus more on their own roles across the organization. The more you can remove those, I'll just call it overall frustration points, it allows people to focus on what they do best. As I think about people, processes, and systems, I think about how does finance, how does the operational organizational structure make it so that the rest of the organization can do their jobs better? How do you create the X factor for the rest of the organization? The best way you do that is putting in easy processes that drive results at a faster momentum. If you've got the right purchase order systems, like if people are able just to submit easily and let everybody else do the work for them and they can go back to doing their job, that makes life better for everybody. But if you're having to shepherd, like I need to get this done and it takes me 20 phone calls or 20 touch points, you get frustrated and then you don't do what you were hired to do. So I think about it from how does the operational side of the house create ease of use throughout the organization. And that's usually with having clear, transparent processes, automation, the right people with the right mindsets to support the organization.
It's so funny because reflecting on the different times that I've gone through process transformations, I've made the mistake of doing what is best kind of for the finance team or the accounting team instead of looking at it through the lens of, is my CRO really going to want to file this expense for his travel report this way? I feel like you're somebody who's pretty good at spotting these frictions or these bottlenecks outside of finance.
At the end of the day, what I found is what's good for finance is typically good for the rest of the organization. It's more about how do you frame it and how do you think about it? How are you implement it and why are you implementing it? Like, what is the benefit for everybody else? Finance turns into the no shop, or we're doing this because it makes our lives easier. When we stop to think about how do we make everybody else's life easier, we're actually making our own lives easier at the same time. And I mean, this is just in general. Anytime you create a win for both sides, it just gets adopted easier. Usually it's the sales and marketing team that's doing most of the travel in the organization. So if we're making it easier for them, they're more likely to submit their expense report on time, which makes our lives easier on the finance side. And so creating those win-win situations and thinking about it from that aspect rather than, I'll call it being selfish.
Can you think of a time that you broke down some walls and made a process easier for another team within the organization?
I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunities where I've been successful and where I can do better. Having conversations across the business of understanding where there's friction, where there's pain points, where they're spending more time than they probably should. And then diagnosing from that, how do we make life better for them? Travel expense is just a great example. Purchase orders is another. Marketing is an organization that tends to have a lot of purchase orders, going to events, sponsorships, and things like that. And that is an area where when we can partner together and find how do we support them better in terms of making the ask, submitting it through the system, making sure that we're following up on approvals and giving them visibility is a great way to take something off their plate. But then it's also around, I'll call it data transparency. How do you give information back to the business so that they can make decisions easier, faster, better, smarter, and that they're not having to spend their days doing a lot of that work themselves?
Can you say more about the data transparency part? Because sometimes I wrestle with if finding frictions in the org, you can just look at a piece of paper and see the data, or if it's a conversation, or if it's just gut feel from sitting back and saying, I'm experiencing the rhythm of the organization right now.
I think there's I'll call it a concept of crawl, walk, run, because you have to build a data infrastructure across the organization. But First and foremost is building data trust and creating that single source of truth. We're a subscription-based business. ARR is our most important metric, that we focus on. If we don't have trust in a single source of truth in ARR, doesn't allow for the business to make valuable decisions. And then you're spending a lot of time arguing about what is the right number. And so the conversation goes from, well, is that correct or is this correct, to, okay, we now know what the information is. Now, how do we do better? Is it what we expected? Did we go off course? Why or why not? How do we improve on that? How do we build on that? You turn the conversation into strategic. The way that I've built it up is, starting with creating that trust, single source of truth. How do you then multiply that and be forward deployed across all other parts of the organization so that you're sharing information in an operational way so that other leaders can use that information to make the right decisions for their business?
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. We've all been burned. We've all bought that enterprise planning tool that promised the world, only to realize 6 months later that we've basically taken on a second full-time job just to keep the software running. I want to talk about a company that was built specifically to kill that cycle, Abacum. I actually remember my very first conversation with their founder and CEO, Julio Martinez, over 3 years ago. Back then, they were just starting out in Spain. Fast forward to today, Julio moved the home base to NYC, and they're the engine behind finance teams at Strava, Replit, and JG Wentworth. Abacum doesn't turn you into a software admin. The integrations are actually self-service. You don't need a $300 an hour consultant to plug in your ERP or HRIS, and they're doing AI in a way that actually impacts the things fp&a teams are doing every day. Things like creating variance summaries, building formulas, and modeling scenarios. If you're scaling fast and you're trying to avoid that legacy platform trap, Abacum is the move. They're building the future of our tech stack, and they're doing it with a CFO's perspective. Go to abacum.ai to see it for yourself. That is abacum.ai. Well. Here's what nobody tells you about being a CFO. You'll spend 50% of your time on stuff that is killing your momentum. The best CFOs I know are business leaders who know how to drive growth in heroic fashion. But most of us end up spending our days buried in manual work. I'm talking about collecting receipts, reviewing expenses, and manually reconciling spend. It's painful. That's why CFOs need Brex. Brex built an intelligent finance platform that pairs corporate cards with built-in expense management, plus a team of AI agents to handle the manual finance tasks for you. That way, CFOs have more time for the high-impact projects that drive growth. The shit actually worthy of your CFO time. Bottom line, Brex is automating hundreds of thousands of hours of manual finance work every month across 35,000 companies like Anthropic, Coinbase, and DoorDash. Ready to spend less time buried in expenses and more time driving results? Check out Brex at brex.com/metrics. It is brex.com/metrics. Please, guys, how the hell do I have 3 kids in daycare? Brex.com/metrics. You just launched a new AI product. The new pricing page looks great. I'm talking crisp. But behind it, last-minute glued code, messy spreadsheets, and running ad hoc queries to figure out what to bill. Customers get invoices they can't understand. Engineers are chasing billing bugs. Finance can't close the books. Well, with Metronome, you hand it all off to the real-time billing infrastructure that just works. Reliable, flexible, and built to grow with you. They turn raw usage events into accurate invoices, give customers bills they actually understand, and keep every team in sync in real time. Whether you're launching usage-based pricing, managing enterprise contracts, or rolling out new AI services, Metronome does the heavy lifting so you can focus on your product, not your billing. That's why some of the fastest growing companies in the world like OpenAI and Anthropic run their billing on Metronome. Visit metronome.com to learn more. That's metronome.com. Forward deployed. That is such a cool term. I'm gonna steal that and put it on a bumper sticker. What does that mean? Does that mean kind of self-serve data, or people are just aware at the right times?
I would say it's more aware at the right time. So, and I stole that term from our CEO, Kyle. So I can't take credit for it because I liked it too. But it's about having the data operation. So, finance, fp&a, the business intelligence groups, working directly with, let's say, the support teams. and giving the support teams the information that they need in order to make better decisions. So capacity planning, how much, you're getting support tickets of this, like these kinds of themes. It's happening this often. Support calls are coming at this time of the day most often. Those types of information that are served up in real time in a way that's consumable, so that not only does the operational support leaders have information at their fingertips so they can make better decisions, but we're helping them with the analysis so that they can understand, what does this data mean? How can they improve on it? Where do we see, I'll call it glitches? How do we do what if scenarios? If we release this product, how many more support calls do we think we're going to have? What type of customers, what kind of level of support do we think we need to have, so we can be predictive in our responses, helping the other leaders with the ability to manage their own business.
Yeah, that's brilliant the way you've explained it. And it kind of goes back to the data integrity too, because there's this fine line of almost being too forward deployed where people can pull any data they want and then they can craft a story that kind of fits any narrative that they need it to. It's kind of like a benchmark in the wrong hands can be a bad benchmark. But at the same time, you don't want to be the bottleneck where you're holding all that information back and they don't actually know what's going on.
Different organizations I've been at have tried to solve that problem differently. We have centralized the data and business intelligence teams into one, but we have a team focused on marketing. We have a team focused on sales, so that they are essentially embedded with their counterparts and their stakeholders, but they operate under a neutral data environment. We have a templated process. We've operationalized data and business intelligence. We create a single source of truth, but then they are working to better the rest of, their stakeholder operations. I have been in organizations where the data teams have been decentralized. The classic example is sales has their data and marketing has their data, and never shall the two meet. They're trying to take that data and serve their own purpose, create their own argument. And that makes it really difficult to reconcile the information and then make business decisions as a whole. Here at Huntress, we've centralized it so that we can create that single source of truth.
I vividly remember this meeting in my career, Maria, like 5 years ago, where we showed up to talk about basically the efficiency of the sales team. And the sales ops team showed up with one CAC payback period number, and then fp&a showed up with a different CAC payback period number. First of all, numbers don't match. And second of all, how would you even have that data, sales team, because we have the cost data? And they're like, well, how would you have the right revenue figures for that period? Because it came out of the CRM. And we got into this debate, and the actual takeaway was we were all wrong, because you should have the data in one place centralized, that this doesn't happen anyway.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect example. And I've certainly been in similar situations. By having a centralized team that is, embedded, we're able to have these really good debates and conversation around, does this make sense? Where do we need to poke more? Where do we need to gather more information so it's a more fully fleshed data source? But then we also, by having those more collaborative conversations, we get buy-in on the data as well. Yes, we're all locking arms. This is the data that we all agree is correct. Not only is it from a single source, but we believe it's an informed single source, and we can all move forward with that data as the premise for the conversation. And being able to do that up front and building that trust allows the conversation to go to strategy versus arguments over, did you do this or not within the data source?
Throughout your career, Maria, have you seen the types of data that your team is entrusted with being kind of the steward of change? Did it start with just financial data and then it evolved to also include sales and operational data? And now I imagine fast-growing cybersecurity company, you also have to know the product data.
So I've been at Huntress for a year, and we've been evolving the data, who we support and how we support them. When we started, it was really mostly focused on go-to-market, but now we're expanding across the whole rest of the organization. In prior companies, we had a little bit more maturity and had time and seat. We did support the entire organization. So it was everything in go-to-market. It was also in product. At that company, we were an AWS shop. We were able to, over time, tag the AWS data to every component of our product. And by looking at the different trend data on a daily, hourly, monthly basis, we were able to see bugs that were happening in the product. We were able to see when a customer may be using the product incorrectly and not in line with our business model, or we were eventually able to get to the point where we could do some testing and say, if we release this feature, it's going to cost us this much.
Wow.
And then be able to make some decisions around, well, if that's the cost, we would have to price it this way to the market. And in one case, we were able to say the market wouldn't absorb that price point. And so we pulled back on that feature and said, we can't release it until we re-architect it in a more cost-effective manner. So there's a lot of ways that by embedding the data team in with the different operational areas, we can help inform business decisions across the teams.
That's nirvana if you can be able to tie your cloud infrastructure costs back to how you price a package and how you staff the surrounding team around it.
And it was such a great partnership between engineering, the product team, the cloud support team, and the data team and fp&a team. Quite frankly, I almost looked forward to the meetings every week. We had fun together, but we were also debating and discussing and challenging each other around how do we make this better. And then I found out that the engineering team, in their daily stand-ups, they looked at our dashboards that we built every morning.
You got engineers to look at a finance dashboard?
Isn't that awesome? But they did it because they saw how much value it was, because it was telling them what was going on in the product. So they saw that this was important not only to our delivery of the product to our customers, but to our business model itself and our profitability and things like that. They institutionalized it as part of their business model.
That's so cool to hear, because I've had instances in my career where I try to speak with the cloud operational team who's typically on engineering. And we're talking past each other. Like, I'm saying one thing, they're not even understanding the language I'm using. They're saying another thing, and I know there isn't a dollar sign attached to the numbers they're giving me. Kudos to you to get everybody to speak the same language.
It was more people on my team than it was me. They just spent a lot of time together. It's learning each other's languages in order to create the dashboards, the data, like what do we need to do? How do we need to do it? How do we create a framework? How do we create data governance? All that is part of the process.
And as finance leaders, I found that if you were just 10% more curious or willing to learn 10% more from a technical perspective and feel stupid in that moment to ask those questions, it unlocks twice the amount of value. It's a nonlinear amount of relationship building, but also value you get from the engineering and technical side of the house if you're willing to say, I'll ask that question and I actually want to know how the product works.
Yes, and that's across the whole business. People love to talk about what they do. Product, marketing, sales, they love to talk about what they do. And if you're curious, like you said, and you want to learn more, people will just continue to talk. And there's so much learnings in that. When I started Huntress, my mantra was, I get to be a 2-year-old. I'm going to ask why 1,000 times. I'm not disputing anything. I'm not criticizing everything. I just want to learn. What is the reason we do this? How do we do this? Is this going to help us propel forward, and how and why? And what do you think about this process or this thing? And that just sets the stage that we're here to learn.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Here's a growth tax nobody talks about. Every new monetization model you ship creates a nightmare for your finance team. Add usage-based pricing? Now you're tracking consumption against commitments. Launch product bundles? That's multiple performance obligations per contract. Offer mid-cycle upgrades? Woo! Good luck reallocating revenue manually. But that's exactly where RightRev shines. RightRev is the revenue recognition engine built for companies that can't afford to let accounting slow down growth. When your rev rec is automated, your product team can ship new pricing without asking finance for permission. And your sales team can close creative deals without worrying about downstream chaos. To get up on my CFO soapbox for a sec, I love talking about creative pricing models, hybrid pricing, credits, tiered usage. But I've seen too many companies where the sales team is celebrating a huge quarter while finance is still trying to figure out how to recognize half of it. In a world where your pricing model might change 3 times next year, that flexibility is everything. If you want to scale your monetization without breaking your books, visit RightRev.com. That's RightRev.com, where modern monetization meets bulletproof accounting. Being a CFO, you know how much I love tools that actually make the lives of accounting and finance folks easier. One of my favorite tools right now is Rillet, the AI native ERP going head-to-head with NetSuite. Yes, someone is finally doing it. I met Rillet 2 years ago when they were still in stealth. Since then, they've absolutely taken the finance world by storm. Their mission is to make the zero-day close a reality, and they're actually doing it. Customers are literally closing their books at 1:35 p.m. on the first day of the month. They've got everything you need to scale your business. Complex revenue recognition, native integrations, custom reporting, multi-entity, close management, and much more. They're only a few years in and are already supporting NASDAQ publicly listed companies. Yes, seriously. If you want to scale your business on an ERP that wasn't built in the 90s, you need to check out Rillet. Book a demo at rillet.com/CJ. Oh, cool, that's me. That's RILLET.com/CJ. RILLET.com/CJ. Tell them I sent you there. Ali and the team at Tabs are building something that directly addresses one of the biggest headaches I see finance teams deal with today. Pulling data from your ERP, your CRM, your fp&a tools, and your usage systems and actually making it all work together. If you're running usage-based pricing or complex contracts, you already know how this usually plays out. Contracts live in one system, usage data lives somewhere else, billing happens in another tool. RevRec gets layered on top at month end, and finance ends up just reconciling everything by hand to close the books. This is exactly the problem Tabs was built to solve. Tabs is an AI-native revenue platform built for controllers and CFOs. It brings together data from your ERP, CRM, and real product usage into a single system of record. From there, it automates billing, collections, and revenue recognition without finance having to duct tape workflows together every month. If usage-based revenue is core to your business, this is the future of how billing and RevRec get done. Go check them out at tabs.com/run. That's tabs.com/run. Speaking of learning, I know that you're big on listening to the business and what it needs. When you think about listening to the business and trying to figure out, do we want to go for impact here? Do we want to go for perfection? How do you decide which side of the spectrum you have to be on? And if you're going to go after a big win versus just try to stack some small wins when you first show up?
I think at the beginning, it's about building trust. At least it is for me. It's about making sure I understand the business enough to create the right impacts at the right time in the right way. Then it's also about, is what I'm going to do going to deliver value? Trust is never given overnight, particularly as a new leader coming into the organization. And having small wins, I think, is a great way to build trust as you're thinking through bigger projects. Because as a new executive, I've done this before. I've gone in, I had the big idea. I'm like, this is transformational. I'm going to run with it. And it just absolutely backfired in my face because I didn't understand all the components about the business. There were some things I just didn't know, that maybe this didn't work perfectly the way I had thought it would. I didn't get buy-in along the way. I kind of try to jam it down somebody's throat. And had I just taken extra time to get their thoughts, their feedback, roll it out in a more thoughtful way, it would have been a whole different story. But I wanted to have my win. And if I had just done things a little slower in a more thoughtful way, brought people along, I would have had a much better outcome. So I've learned from that lesson. I do try and do those smaller things first as I'm learning about how to do a bigger thing along the way and building that political capital so that I can take some of those bigger transformational leaps.
Coming into a role for the first time, it pays in the long term to break down some walls that may have been there for people in the org up to that point.
I find I have better success if I've built the relationships, I understood their needs, I've built the trust that I can deliver on something, and showing people along the way how what I'm doing is going to help them. And then I get their feedback to help shape what that is. That's just worked for me. I need a little bit more time to build the trust.
It is tempting, though, when you come into a company for the first time, you have fresh eyes, but you also don't have, call it like the built up cartilage of what's occurred over the years, just to come in and be like, no, we should blow this thing up over here. We should completely change that. But you don't have the historical context to inform why things are the way they are.
Sometimes, you come into an organization and with fresh set of eyes, you see immediately what needs to happen. And everybody might agree with you, but change is hard. Nobody really likes change. And so sometimes it's also a matter of helping them get comfortable that this is going to change and help them see why it benefits them or benefits the org and have it rolled out in a way that is not disruptive to the organization as best as possible.
Maria, as CFOs, do you think we do enough to celebrate and publicize the small wins?
No.
Say more.
This has been in every organization I've been in, so it has to be something in our DNA or maybe in my leadership. We're so operationally task-oriented in terms of we see this list of all these things that we know that we have to get done. If I get this thing done, then I can move to the next thing and then the next thing. But then we don't stop and say, oh my gosh, yes, we got that done. And so I don't think at least I don't do a great job of stopping and celebrating the wins. And in fact, when we were prepping for this podcast, I have a town hall coming up. I think I need to add some celebrations to it because I haven't done enough of that.
Can you think of any small wins that are really bigger if you step back?
The biggest one is, and it sounds small, but it has that reverberating impact of, you throw a stone into the pond and you get the ripple effect. It's about mindset around what is the finance, accounting, business intelligence teams. What can they do for the organization? Many times when I've gone into different teams, it's tasks, it's transactional. I'm going to record this transaction. It needs to be accurate. I need to get it done by month-end close. I need to produce this report. But not many times do we take it to the next couple of steps of what does this tell us? What insights does this generate? What can I recommend back to the business of this is what I'm seeing. This is how we can be better. This is how we can do different. At the end of the day, absolutely everything that happens in the business ends up in the financial statements. And so in order to end up in the financial statements, we see everything. We have a 360-degree view of the business. No one better in the organization except for potentially the CEO, but he doesn't always have the data, or she doesn't have the data unless we give it to him. We have that capability of connecting all this information and driving insights. And so it's changing the mindset of the team from doing transactions, getting this done, to driving insights and recommendations across the business.
Maria, I noticed that you spend a lot of time in go-to-market. Why should more CFOs have a seat at the revenue table?
Part of the CFO's job is predictability, forecasting the results of what's going to happen next so that we can do better planning. If we have more information about what's going on in the business, we're able to do a lot more of those what-if scenarios. Here's what we think is going to happen. Here's how we're going to get there. Or we're starting to see that we're going off course and we're not going to end up where we expected. What levers can we pull to change those outcomes? The only way we can get to that level of forecasting predictably is by starting at the top, by understanding the go-to-market funnel, understanding the sales funnel, understanding what's happening in it, conversion rates, how are conversations going on with customers, and really having a partnership with the go-to-market team around what does that sales forecast look like for that period of time, and building that muscle within the organization within a couple percentage points every period. And it's very predictable. You can only do that if you have a solid relationship and understand the different components of the go-to-market cycles in order to create that downward forecasting flow.
Do you think there are any revenue-related metrics that teams think they understand, but it would be helpful if the CFO gave them context on how it plays into the larger org?
One of the biggest lessons that I learned earlier in my career is that Most people don't have as much of a solid understanding of financial metrics as I do. And that's because this is my job. This is what I do every day. This is what I was trained to do. An engineer, she was trained to code. I can't code. They can. And so it's my job to make sure that I'm educating the company on what is important to the business. Open book management has been around for a long time. I've been a proponent of that. But I think we have to go deeper into why is this important? Why am I asking these questions? Why would my decision be this way? So that one, we're showing the whole organization how to be better stewards of the business, but also so that it becomes more of a collaborative conversation as well. How do we shape this particular deal to get better gross margins? How do we shape this deal to be a win for, from a legal perspective from both sides? But the only way we do that is by educating the company on the things that matter.
I'd imagine it makes it easier to say no when you have to, if they have that fundamental understanding of the why.
At a prior company, I had come in and we had gross margin detail at a company level, but we hadn't yet built it down to the product and customer level. And we had a large customer, millions of dollars. We built out the model from down to the customer gross margin perspective. And we were all a little surprised because we were losing significant, millions of dollars on this customer. When we walked through the data that we had with the head of sales and the account manager, we're like, tell me where I'm off, because this can't be true. It was right. We were losing a lot of money on this one particular customer. And because we were able to show this data and have this collaborative conversation, the sales team was encouraged to go out and renegotiate this contract with the customer at renewal. And we actually brought some of this data to the customer and showed them, like, listen, we're losing money on you. This can't continue. No customer wants to be a loss leader for their vendors either. So it changed the discussion. And instead of it being the no CFO of I need X gross margins on this deal, it was let's have a conversation. How do we change the levers in the business? Maybe we change what we give the customer. We change the delivery mechanism. We change the turnaround response times, things like that. It became a discussion.
That story right there is what this podcast is all about, honestly, the tactical examples of something like that in motion. And it illuminates how if you explain to people why and trace back the impact of the actions of different team members, whether they know it or not, and just show them what the results are, it comes across as you bringing them under the tent. You're on the team here to help solve this rather than pointing fingers and saying, how the hell could you go and sell this product at a loss?
When we renegotiated it, actually at one of the company town halls, I actually gave a presentation to the whole company as to this is why we did what we did for this particular customer. I wanted everybody to understand that we made a very deliberate decision based on the facts and the information.
It was intentional. Yeah.
It was intentional. Once we started giving the information out, people were like, oh, really? You're kidding me. We're losing that much? Okay, yeah, I understand why we did what we did now. And so it helps change the conversation some.
And people like it when you treat them like adults. You tell them the facts.
People want to do right for the business. And I'm in, call it growth stage tech companies. We're all owners of the business. We all have stock options. And so we all think about it not just from, our day-to-day, lives, but we all want this outcome. And so if we think about how do we make business decisions that are best for the business, our customers, our stakeholders, our employees, we're owners. We're taking ownership in the business. And the best way to do that is to understand how the business operates, the business metrics, the business levers, so that we can all play with them.
And you mentioned you're in the growth stage seat right now. What's the biggest mental shift that CFOs have to make as they move from VC back to, say, PE back to public environments? Are they different?
I've operated in each of those, and I've been, a board member, CEO, and CFO in those different environments. And they do operate differently. In a VC-backed organization, depending on which stage you're in, you're really focused on that growth, showing that your product has market fit, market applicability. How fast can you grow and take on market share, build that leadership position? The conversation is really around growth. PE, depending on which PE you're at, is a little bit more about balancing growth with profitability. You're operating more within a box. Here's your box. Now tell me what you can do within that box. Public is a little bit more like that because now you're doing it in terms of those short-term investor wins of, we have to hit this number because if we don't hit this number, our stock price is going to get dinged. And so you're constrained even further from being innovative. And, for me personally, I love the innovative environment. I love that growth stage of just continuing to put the investments into the go-to-market channel, into the product, and gaining that market share. That's an environment that I've thrived in. But, you also have to think about the balance because money is not endless. So it's about how do you make those trade-offs, those resourcing decisions, those allocations, and how do you help fuel those different components of the business in a more optimized and effective manner.
Let's say you are operating in that box. It's a PE-backed environment. Is it easier to make decisions because there are less levers to pull or there's not as wide of a standard deviation? Or is it actually harder because you're operating under constraints?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Okay.
It is easier sometimes when here's what you have to operate in, go do it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got defined guardrails. I can't go off of this or that. And, sometimes as a CFO, it's also a little easier of saying, hey, you don't get any more headcount. This is how much we have.
You can say no pretty easily there.
This is the pot of money. We're done. But at the same time, when you're trying to be creative and innovative, launch a new product or open up a new channel, if you're financially constrained in doing that, then it's really hard to grow the business at any percent rate over and above what you're doing today. Some PEs are fine with that. We grow 20% and have 20% bottom line. My rule of 40s hit, all good. I like to move faster than that.
And you mentioned that you kind of found your, I'll call it product market fit at this growth stage where you get excited about it. What advice would you have to others who have the success and the pedigree that you do, and they get these opportunities where if they want to, they can keep leveling up, they can keep going to bigger and bigger companies? What would you say to them when they know that they kind of enjoy one stage, but if they want to, they could go to the next level?
The biggest thing is probably mentorship. I've, in the last, how many years, been very thoughtful about building, I'll call it my board of advisors, people who've been there, done that, so I can leverage them and understand it. Probably within 2 years here at Huntress, given our growth rates, I will be now at a company out of a size I've never been at before. And so I am building a new board of advisors right now. I'm going around to other CEOs, CFOs, CXOs that have operated in an environment like mine and gone through this kind of scale in order to start learning now what I need to do in 2 years. What do I need to prepare myself? What do I need to prepare the organization so that when we hit, that stage, I've done it, I'm ready for it. But sometimes in those learnings, you find out that might not be what you want. And, your role does change as CFO, as you go through different stages of the organization size. How much you get involved into, I'll call it the down and the dirty. How much do you work in the business versus how much do you work on the business? Absolutely changes as the company scales. How, who are your lieutenants? What's their level of skill set? How do you build that trust and relationship that they got it? I just have to, they give me information and I run, versus having to get into the details of what is going on in each of their environments. So I think about it really from what do you want to do on a daily basis? What kind of impact do you want to have in the organization? Where do you thrive? Where is your skill set and expertise? There's a place for everybody. For a period of time, I loved, being more into the weeds. That was my, I loved getting into it. Now I love more the strategic part of it. So I think part of it's scaling as well, myself.
I have a question on the advisor piece, your own board of directors, because I bet there are tons of people listening right now that say, shoot, I wish I had my own personal board of directors. Do you actually tell them that you are adding them to this informal board, or is it just in your head, you kind of have a list of people that you say, you know what, when something comes up, I'm going to go to X, Y, or Z?
I have with a couple of people said, I really want your advice and will you be my, my advisor as I move forward? Other people, it's more situational. And sometimes I just have to figure out, are we a fit for one another? Like, do they have advice that feels valuable to me?
I found myself in different moments in my career saying, who can I scaffold my weaknesses against here? And it does help to think through that before you get to those sticky points so you can tap into that network.
Absolutely. And it was a lesson that took me a long time to learn, to build a network and be vulnerable enough to ask questions, to say, I don't know this, I need your assistance or I need your advice. Help me be better because you've done this, you've learned from it, or here's my situation. Help me talk this through. I need a thought partner in this. For a long time, I didn't have any of that. And that's on me because I didn't want to be vulnerable. And now I've learned I can actually be stronger because I have the network effect.
Well, there are two things there that are brilliant that you just pointed out. One, it's having that network in place to speak to. So thinking through how you're going to assemble them and putting in the work, you do need to make an effort. The second thing is actually talking to them in a vulnerable way. And like you said, I don't know this, being open about it.
That was a hard lesson for me. I felt I always had to know it all. And I had to show up being knowledgeable because that's the only way I was going to be valuable. I learned that wasn't true. It took coaching from other people to say, it's okay if you don't know this. We haven't done this before. We haven't been at Huntress this size in this environment with these things happening in the world around us. It's new to everybody. So let's lean on others who have done it, done something similar before so we can learn from it and not make the mistakes ourselves.
You've mentioned how important it is to just see another female exec in the role that you want to be in. What's one moment in your career where visibility made the difference for you?
There's not that many female CFOs in high tech, and particularly not growing up in my career. Building that board of advisors, I sought out other female executives along the way that I could leverage their advice. There's a lot of places where each of us in our careers, in our personal lives, have situations that we could use someone to bounce ideas off of. At the time, I was a CFO of a public company. I had a 2-year-old and an infant at home. And how do you manage that?
I don't know.
And so leveraging, advice from people who had been there, done that. The best pieces of advice someone gave me was work-life balance that doesn't exist. As an executive, it's an integrated life. And some days work is more and sometimes personal life is more. For me, it took the pressure off because I thought I had to be perfect every day in both aspects of my life. And I was putting so much stress on myself to do that. It was hampering my ability to be successful at either one. And once I had this framework in my head of integration and not necessarily balance, I don't know, for me, it was an unlock.
That was a huge unlock for me too. Now, I wasn't managing 2 toddlers at the time like you were. Just the idea that you don't have to show up every day and be like, this many hours are dedicated to work, this many hours are dedicated to my family. You may go through a fundraiser where it's completely out of whack. You may also go through a period of time where, hey, I'm going to coach my daughter or son's soccer team, and it's going to be a little bit different. You just have to be okay with that.
I love what you said, that be okay with it. It's making a choice, understanding you've made a choice, and being okay and accepting that that was a choice that you made, and then move on.
That's sage advice right there. Maria, gearing towards a close, I'm going to take you into our lightning round. So I ask every successful person who's came on the podcast before, what's an example of something that you've screwed up on the job before? Could be here or any other previous role.
I've got lots of things I've done. The biggest one was not being patient, not getting the buy-in. I took the consulting route for a little bit, and I was an interim CFO. I came into an organization, I was told by the CEO, the finance team isn't necessarily how I want it right now. I need you to evolve it. And I came in, I saw what needed to be done. I jammed it through. I'm like, good, we're done. And then I realized that I didn't teach anybody anything. I told them what to do. I didn't teach them how to do it. That meant that they could not continue this. They didn't learn something from this process. That really started my journey on making sure I'm bringing people along, making sure they understand the why, showing them how to do it, getting their collaboration and buy-in in the conversation so that this is something that they would like to continue and move forward with in a way that is impactful for the business and for themselves.
Because it is possible just to steamroll people and get a result.
I could do it. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not the long-term plan, right?
If I do it that way, I have to be part of the process every time. I hampered myself, I hampered the business, I hampered the people because I didn't do it right.
If you could give your younger self advice, knowing what you know today, what would you tell her?
Trust your gut. My first CFO role did not go so well. I got into a business and found out a couple of members of the management team, including the CEO, were doing things that were not quite above board. It was my first CFO role, and I had to figure out, do I tell people it was fraud at a low level, but it was fraud. And I knew I was going to lose my job if I told people. And so it was that first moment of conviction within myself that, okay, I'm going to lose my job. You know, my integrity and making sure the investors have the right information was more important to me than my first CFO job. I did the right thing. I lost my job. Ultimately, as things came to light, the CEO lost his job. But that was a hard one to be put in that position as a first-time CFO.
First rodeo being a CFO, and you're faced with this binary decision, but you know what the right answer is.
But it was hard. How do I support myself?
And you worked your whole career to finally get that shot.
Ultimately, it turned out fine. I got my next CFO job. And for me, it's like, okay, I trusted my gut. I stuck with my integrity, and I got back up again.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. On that note, more of a technical one. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools does your team use to get the job done?
So we have NetSuite. On top of NetSuite, we have Brex. We implemented Zip HQ for our procurement system. We have Pigment on our fp&a side. We just implemented that this summer. And then we have Snowflake and Sigma as our primary tools on the data and business intelligence side.
I love it. Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
I'm going to date us a little bit, but back when you had pay TV, one of our salespeople expensed the porn show that he was watching. When I went back to him to explain that we would not be reimbursing him, he said, well, what else am I supposed to do in my hotel room at night?
He was surprised that you weren't.
And so I explained to him, you do whatever you'd like to do in your hotel room. We're just not going to pay for it.
I didn't expect that one from the top ropes. I'm glad we can add that one to the show. Maria, thank you for making time for us today, and congrats on all the momentum at Huntress and your incredible career.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun.
Run the Numbers is a mostly media production. Yelling and intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by Meg D'Alessandro. Show is executive produced by Ben Hillman. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog way too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses. LOL. If you like this podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. It will take like 2 seconds, and our algorithm overlords love it. Drink water, call your mom, and have a great day. Peace.